Hey, hey,
How are you? This
I'm
is
doing
Dream
great.
Idiots. That's Bryan, who's doing great. I'm Morris, who's going to be talking like this for a while because I'm going to Ireland this summer.
Ah, nice.
And I want you all to hear what I'm going to sound like right before I get my face kicked in a pub somewhere, because I'll be talking like this.
So
Um,
the treats are supposedly mostly Irish because back in the old country we were the O treats.
oh, treats. Oh, treats. Uh, well, my big problem is that I'm also part English and Irish and, one
Mhm.
person. So that's going to be interesting. Anyway. This is Dream Idiots, where Mr. Treat and I tell each other stories from week to week, and we take turns taking the lead. Normally here we would have announcements. The only thing I have to say is that please check us out at dreamidiots.com. You can drop us a line. You can let us know things you want us to cover. You can give us suggestions for curse words of the week. And I'm handling those chores later at the end of the episode for our curse word of the week this week.
Mhm.
Or just say hey, or just say stop. Whatever it is you want to say to us.
Please, God, no more. Yes, all the above. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We have had a delightful little spike in Spotify subscribers. No
Yeah,
idea why.
welcome aboard.
Like we've added a couple hundred in the last month. And so if you're listening to us on Spotify, welcome. If you can, give us 5 stars, shoot us a review. That'd be hugely helpful. We haven't had any new reviews in a while, so that'd be appreciated if you don't mind.
Your show is like a double-decker outhouse. All
All
right.
right.
You are taking the lead this week, Brian. What do you have for us this
All
week on
right.
Dream Idiots?
For my story this week, we are headed to Tonga
Tonga.
in the South Pacific.
Okay.
If you don't know exactly where Tonga is, and there's really no reason why you should, unless were from the area, it's fairly close to Fiji and American
Okay.
Samoa. American Samoa is a few hundred miles to the north. Fiji is off to the west, like 500 miles. If you kept sailing, I think southwest from Tonga, you would eventually hit New Zealand. And so we're right in the middle of a great big empty, as Colonel Blake once said. To understand this story, you have to also understand Tonga in the 1960s. The Kingdom of Tonga then, as it is, I think, to this day, is deeply traditional. Family authority matters a lot. Religion mattered. School discipline was a big thing. And Tonga is a series of islands that sort of stretch down to the southwest. The largest of which is Tonga Tapu. Capital city there is Nuku'alofa. Present day population there is around 26,000. In the 1960s, population of that city anyway, is probably a third of that. So most children are growing up under fairly strict expectations for teenagers, especially
Okay.
boys. Life can feel small and heavily controlled. And for anyone who grows up in a small town in America, in Tonga, anywhere in the world, most of those folks kind of take one of two paths. They either accept life in that area and they learn to love it and they stay there for their entire life, or
Hmm.
they seek out the big city and the broader world and they move away and never come back.
Hmm.
Pretty much everyone in this story is in the latter category. They want the broader world. The world beyond Tonga, I'm sure, in 1960s, it's fairly remote. Larger world feels large and but unwieldy, but also exciting. And we have 6 boys that are in the center of this story. They are, I think it's pronounced Sione, Sione, Fataua, Stephen Kalepi, David Tavita, Luke Vekoso, Kolo Fikatoa, and Manu Totau. These 6 boys are attending school together at the St. Andrew's College. St. Andrew's is an Anglican school, and they're all approximately 13 to 15 years of age, although some reports that kind of varies. And 13 teenage boys. When I was 15,
Hmm.
I was the biggest dumbass on the planet. And they're bored and they're talking about escaping. They want some adventure. They're talking about going to maybe we can go to Fiji, maybe we can go to New Zealand. They're eager for something bigger and better than their current existence. June 11th, 1965, they set about carrying out their plan. They sneak down to the harbor and steal a small fishing boat belonging to a man named Tanila. It's 24 feet long, has an anchor and a small sail, but it's an open topped. Basically, it's a fishing boat. There's no below deck.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not designed for long voyages in the open ocean. The boys hurriedly, because they're stealing this boat, hurriedly they slept on board bananas, coconuts, a little bit of water, a small gas burner, nothing for navigation whatsoever. So there's no compass, there's no map, there's no emergency supplies should someone get injured, sick, hurt. But they're pumped up. They're excited. They're dumbass
Hmm.
teenage boys.
If they could,
They're-
they'd be playing Into the Great Wide Open by Tom Petty.
right, right. Really, really stupid. But they're excited about this adventure. And yeah, so they're laughing, and the ocean is calm, and they push out, and they are on their way. I believe they must have also had oars of something, of
Hmm.
something to sort of help paddle out, but I'm not sure about that. And so they go out, and it's their first night in the boat at sea, and things start turning badly quickly. They do, have some wisdom. They realize they need to take turns sleeping, and so someone stays awake at all times. But at some point during that first night, some rough seas roll in, and in the course of this storm, the rope to the anchor snaps. Strong winds just seize the boat, tear the sail apart, just rip a bunch of huge holes in it. And before dawn, when the sail is damaged, they've all been basically up most of the night, fighting the storm, trying to stay on the thing, probably. The storm passes. It's still nighttime, and they're wiped out, and they all fall asleep. Oops. Uh,
Hmm.
they wake up some hours later. The sun is now out. Tonga is gone. They see nothing. There is a 360-degree view of water, and that's all they have. So the Pacific Ocean, probably any ocean, probably any body of water anywhere, can have a terrible psychological effect when you realize that you can't see any land. With no landmarks, no visible shore, water in every direction, people lose any sense of distance or direction or orientation, and the boys just drift helplessly. One day
Okay.
becomes one day becomes two, then into three, then four. Food, they didn't really pack much food in the first place. Food becomes a little bit scarce. It's a big problem. Bigger problem though really is water. They didn't really bring any water either.
And day
Dehyd
five, one of them says, "Is this a metaphor for life?"
right. Please drink my blood. Something. Dehydration is going to be fatal before starvation is.
Hmm.
The tropical sun is just constant during daylight hours, and then salt exposure makes dehydration even worse.
Hmm.
Uh, they tried to capture rainwater when they could. Storms open up, so they have these coconut shells that they're trying to catch water if possible. They had some scraps of material from the sail that they would use to sort of guide water into their mouths or into something to collect it in. At times, they would get so thirsty they would even drink seawater, even though they knew
Oh,
even though they knew that was not the right thing to do. That would just make them sicker faster, but just desperation. Some accounts say they were able to catch seabirds that would land on the boat
hmm.
and catch the bird and drink the bird's blood for moisture. And some other accounts also suggested they may have been able to catch a fish or two, but I don't think they had fishing gear, so I'm not sure whether that's true or not. So, they've been out there for a while. Um, Morale starts to sag. Arguments break out. Then there's long periods of silence. Then there is prayer. Then they're negotiating with their God. Please send me. It's the whole bargaining that desperation creates, right?
Yeah, and they could have stayed in their Anglican school for all of those things, right? I mean, they didn't have to
Exactly.
be out on a boat in the ocean.
So they're thinking of their families and how worried they must be. And are we going to find land? Are we going to find food? Are we going to ever find anything? And so as bad as baking in the sun is during the day, the nights are even worse because night comes around, storms can pop up.
Mm-hmm.
Waves strike the hull. Wind is just screaming through what's left of their sail at various points in time. And this is probably the most terrifying thing. They could feel large unseen creatures moving in the water and banging into the bottom of the boat. I'm not sure what would be moving around in the middle of the night, but whales? I don't know what would be down there.
Sharks.
Sharks. And I suppose if you're desperate to escape the sun during the day, you might have the instinct to hop in the water to just escape the sun. But then, is there some large toothy
Mm-hmm.
creature beneath you, looking up, going, "Oh, huh, lunch," right? So that might not be a great idea either. So you have 12 basically children floating in the largest ocean in the world, and no one knew where they were. They were just fucking gone, right?
Wait, how many children? 12?
Six.
Six. Okay.
Did I say 12?
Yeah.
Six total.
Okay. I was
You know
like,
that.
what
Six
else they
kids.
been doing on that boat? Okay.
Six kids. So they're out there for quite a while. After 8 days, magically, they're all still alive. How they manage that without just dying from dehydration. Someone spots land. They see land on the horizon, and because they're weak and they probably thought they were hallucinating because they just see something over there
Mm-hmm.
and you can't tell whether it's 100 yards or 100 miles. They get closer, they start rowing that direction, the outline starts to sharpen, they can see cliffs, they can see rock vegetation. They have found the island of Ata.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
Ata is a volcanic island. It is southwest of Tonga. Of course, the boys didn't know this. They're over 100 miles away from where they started. Getting ashore proves dangerous because this is not a friendly little beachy island. This is
Mm-mm.
this is all rocks. One boy actually swam ahead of the others. The boat, which is already kind of in disrepair, basically gets smashed up against the rocks, trying to get there. The west facing side of the island is more or less cliffs of Dover, just sheer cliffs into
Mm-hmm.
water. But the whole thing is just inhospitable. You can't. There's no.
Well,
There's no
it's all
like.
made out of volcanic rock, right? I mean,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yes. Exactly. So deep rock cliffs just batter the surf, and they have to time that arrival in order to not themselves get killed.
Mm-hmm.
They do get there. They're exhausted. They're starving, but they had reached land. They managed to carry some of the things they had left with on board, even though the boat smashed. I don't quite know how they managed to do that, but boat is now gone and in pieces at the bottom of the ocean. A tiny bit about Ata. So it is about 3.5 miles around, about a mile across. As I said, about 100 miles south of Nuku'alofu, where they set off from, and a couple other details that the boys didn't know when they landed. No one's living there in the 1960s. No one had been living there for at least 100 years. Subsequent archaeological visits in the 1970s and then in the early 2000s found all kinds of remnants on the island, and carbon dating showed life had been there. Human life had been there back to the 15th century at first, and then other subsequent findings indicated there may have been life there as far back as 400 BC.
Holy cow.
Captain James Cook of Australia fame
Mm-hmm.
stopped there in 1773, and all the islands in this area. I mean, there's scant population there, but this part of the world suffered greatly during the Peruvian slave trade in the 1850s. So ships would come through, drop anchor, go board, find whatever humans they could find, capture who they could
Mm-hmm.
capture, throw them on board, ship them away into slavery. Good times. As I've said before, every story from history is the story of slavery. So the approach to this island was not the most wasn't the glimmering beach that is so friendly. It's surrounded by jagged rocks. It's a volcanic island, but there is a crater at the top. Has this nice little dip that is green and lush, and it's at least fairly hospitable because they don't know this obviously, but it has proven it can sustain life. By 1965, when they're landing here, basically nature has reclaimed everything that's there that had been used by humans, but traces remain. Because they don't know where to go, it takes the boys 2 full days to get to the top, even though it's only a
Mm.
mile across, because they have to navigate these
Mm-hmm.
crazy jutties and things. They get to the top, but they find ruins. They find stone structures, old tools. There's a bunch of wild chickens just running around because they're remnants from old domesticated birds that are just there, which is
Hmm.
super helpful. They find patches of edible plants left behind from earlier generations, coconuts, bananas, a root vegetable called taro.
Hmm.
The chickens were they realized chickens were hard to catch, but chickens laid eggs, and eggs are famously easy to catch.
Hmm. They
Uh,
are.
Seabirds like to nest, basically seagulls, I think, uh, like to nest in the rock faces. And these seabirds were crazy easy to catch because they didn't understand predators at all. So seabirds were easy to catch and eat, and the seabirds also happily laid eggs, so even more food. So they're slaving away here, and these boys demonstrate rather quickly that they are fairly astute. They set about getting themselves organized. They divide chores among the six of them, and set about sort of building a life. Two boys handle gardening. Two boys handle food preparation. Two boys handle lookout and maintenance. Always, all six of them are handling sort of just scoping out the horizon on the off chance you see something.
Sure.
They do walks, tours of the island to find what else is here that we can find and use to our benefit. They established routines because routines create hope, basically. They would stand guard and keep lookout. Every morning began with prayer, every evening ended with prayer. They created structure, and structure prevents despair. Without it, days would blur together, and most people would just mentally unravel. The boys
And
also,
every prayer better start off with, "Oh Heavenly Father, we are sorry to have offended thee."
right, right. They also created rules for conflict. If they got pissed off at each other, they knew that. I mean, the rules were you two have to separate, get the hell away from each other for a certain
That's a
period
good
of
rule.
time.
Yeah.
And there's no fighting allowed. So you separate, cool down, and it was mandatory. And so they had this weird conflict resolution system because they knew that survival depended on unity, basically.
Hmm.
Uh, the kind of most famous anecdote from their time there involves fire. There are kind of two different accounts here. The boy, and in one account, it's stated that one of the boys had managed to save um, one or two matches from the boat, although that doesn't make any sense to me considering they were swimming and the boat sank.
Hmm.
Another account says one of the boys had been taught how to start a fire with sticks. Once they figured out how to get a fire going, during their time there, the fire never went out.
Nope.
They kept the fire alive continuously, and they assigned responsibility for maintaining the embers at all times. That was always someone's job, to
Hmm.
just deal with the fire, because they were worried if it ever went out, we'd never get it back again. So fire provides warmth, and you can cook food, you can boil water. You could also create smoke signals. On numerous occasions, well, at least on some occasions, boats would be spotted on the far horizon. Unfortunately, this isn't like a shipping channel.
Hmm.
There's not large quantities of large boats passing through the area. But if someone spotted something on the horizon, you could grab a stick, you could light it in the fire, you could go to that side of the island or whatever you saw, and start a new fire there, and throw damp leaves on it, whatever you thought was going to be the smokiest, to belch out as much smoke as you possibly could. So no one ever saw those, but psychologically, having fire equals civilization. Fire equals we are a culture that is still functioning. We are here. We are human. We are alive, basically. And so weirdly, for children, they adopt pretty well to island life. They catch fish by hand, and they made spears. They hunted the wild birds, as I said, the seabirds. They got into the habit of collecting eggs from the cliffside nest areas. And the seabirds again, they could just walk up and just if they wanted to kill and eat a seabird that day, they could just walk up to a seabird nest and grab the bird, and the bird just sat there and looked at them. They grew crops in the gardens. Bananas and taro, I think, were basically their staples. Rainwater collection, just as was on the boat, rainwater became vital to survival. They started catching chickens, and they realized that okay, we have to plan for sustainability here. We can't just start killing everything. So they started catching the chickens, and they built a hutch for several dozen of them, figured out what the chickens like to eat, would gather what the chickens like to eat, and just kept them and fed them so they could just endlessly eat the eggs.
That's good.
Just fucking brilliant. Not overusing. The chickens were, they figured out chickens were hard to catch in daylight because they would fly away or fly up into a tree. But they started a game where two of the boys would chase after the chickens close to dusk. When it was dark, the chickens wouldn't fly off, and so it was kind of a game. It was also kind of exercise chasing chickens. Storms would come through and replenish their water supplies, but they never really could count on that either. So they would ration, collect water in coconuts and save them for times where rain didn't happen. Uh, and they also had to just address morale. They told stories. They sang songs. One guy actually fashioned a guitar out of a coconut and a couple other things. They
Oh, he's a regular professor from Gilligan's Island. That's
Exactly. They
yeah.
they they wrote at least five original songs while they're there because they have nothing but time on their hands, I guess. They exercised a whole bunch. They fashioned, of all things, a crude badminton court. There actually is film footage of this. Of all the games you could play, why that? I don't quite get. And they actually had like weightlifting. They fashioned weights out of rocks and various things that they could fly in there as well. But it sounds crazy, but psychologically it sort of makes perfect sense. Routine makes panic go away. Exercise creates purpose. The games help them preserve sanity, and they're trying to maintain kind of a normal life, kind of a regular 8 to 5
Hmm.
routine. And they, at some point, like 6 months in, they fashioned, some sort of basic house structure out of branches. There may have been bamboo growing there as well. So the fire that had been outsourced, they had multiple fires. They could move a fire inside to protect even more. So they're actually doing incredibly well. About 4 months in, two of the boys go off to gather seabird eggs, and these seabirds, make they're seagulls. They're squawking and they're obnoxious and make tons of fucking noise, and they nest in these rock faces, and they're trying to get the eggs, but it's wet. And Stephen takes a nice fall, takes a tumble. He manages to fall 40 feet, just
Holy shit.
ping ponging down this rock face, and really badly breaks one leg. The others manage to get down to him. They manage to slap him back up to the top, and they have to then figure out how to treat a broken leg. They fashion a splint out of sticks and whatever they can find. They feed him. They clean out the wound. And then they set to taking over his responsibilities. And since he's now immobile, basically he's just given the job of tending the fire. You're going to be here. We'll bring
Hmm.
you we'll bring you food. Make sure this doesn't go out. Done. Stunningly, his leg actually heals. Not quickly, but after a few months, he's back to normal. He's not just left for dead,
All
as you
right.
as you probably expect. Again, they're not. You know, there's times of pretty severe despair while they're there. They're missing their family. They're worried about how their disappearance is being viewed. I mean, are people worried? What's going on back at home? And this, they all go through periods of time where their situation feels untenable. I
Hmm.
mean, this can't go on for decades. And the fact that ships are very hard to come by is stressful as well. Days turn into months. Their hair grows out. Their clothing just turns to tatters and just falls away. Eventually, they're just naked all the time. Their skin gets darker and darker, and they turn into survivors. Really, they look very very dissimilar to how they looked when they arrived, and they would spend tons of time climbing the cliffs and just scanning the horizon. Back in Tonga, everyone in Tonga thought the boys were dead. At least one father searched aggressively for a long period of time, but most of the families, thought, okay, these six boys are gone. This boat's gone. Those two things are connected, probably, but they grieved. They assumed that the boys had died. They'd stolen the boat and it capsized, and they were dead.
Hmm.
They held memorial services for all six boys,
Ooh.
and there's no evidence of anything, right? So life goes on. Later on, some family members would say that they had never given up hope, and that's probably true. I have one friend who had a sister who vanished when he was a child, and there was this weird like life was suspended while she was missing. Like was you couldn't really go forward, you couldn't go back, and so for families in that situation, you can deal with the death when you know the death has occurred, but this
Hmm.
weird suspension just has to be this psychologically has to be I don't know just unbearable. So there's a guy named Peter Warner, who's an Aussie who comes through the area. Warner had hailed from a wealthy Australian family who had a big meat processing business, kind of really an empire of businesses involving beef and buffalo and all kinds of things in Australia. His father was Sir Arthur Warner, lots of just a wealthy magnate, lots of other business interests, tons of money, and Peter kind of wanted nothing to do with any of it. He wanted adventure, and he wanted to go fishing. He worked in commercial fishing off and on and spent just tons of time at sea all over this part of the world. In September 1966, Warner is in a boat called the Just David, and they approach the island of Atta. They're looking for new crayfish grounds. I didn't know crayfish. I don't know. I thought cray. I didn't. I don't know. Don't get me
I
started on
think
crayfish.
I think crayfish is isn't that what Aussies call lobsters?
Oh, it could be. I think
I think
crayfish is being
I don't know.
crawfish. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I do too. Yeah.
uh, so they're approaching Atta. I think at first they must have been several hundred yards away, and I'm not completely certain. And they're dealing with these traps. And Warner looks up and he realizes he's looking at scorch marks in the rocks on Atta, which doesn't make any sense because Atta is uninhabited.
Hmm.
Like, well, that's interesting. So they get a little bit closer to the island, but it's windy and the water is a little bit rough. They don't want to get too close. Surface hitting the rocks, and seabirds are making all that damn noise. Finally, his crewman in the bird's nest calls down to him and says he can hear human voices calling out. And Warner calls back up and says, "No, you're crazy. You're hearing birds. You're not hearing humans at all." But then Warner hears human voices too. Uh, and crew members look out and look up on the cliffs and realize, oh, someone's waving at us over here. Um, at first, they can't really figure out if it doesn't look like people at first. And then as they watch, because the boys had been there now for so long, they knew how to navigate the rocks. First, there's one person, one figure approaching them, kind of scampering down these awful rock faces to get down to the shore, and then others behind him. The first boy leaps into the ocean from 10 15 fairly high elevation and is swimming towards them with the other five right behind him basically. And so Warner says they're feral looking and long haired, burnt by the sun. And they get closer. One of them yells out, "My name is Steven." And another one yelled out, we've been here for a year and a half." Warner is kind of skeptical at first. He knows that there's a fairly common practice of basically marooning criminals on islands. If you have someone in
Hmm.
your society where you're like, yeah, you don't, we're getting rid of you, you just dump them somewhere. He thinks maybe that's who he's found here. So he kind of has his rifle close at hand when as they get closer, and he doesn't throw the ladder down at first, so they can't get on board. But then, after kind of chatting over the side for a moment, he decides to trust them, tosses down the ladder, and all six, climb on board. They're naked, feral looking, somewhat skinny, but don't look that bad really. And they're all talking at once, and they're super excited, and they're talking about Tonga and their families. We've been here for a year and a half. Da, 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 da. And do you have any food by chance? We could be, we wouldn't mind a munch depending on what you have.
We're
Warner
might
gi-
peckish.
Warner gives them some rations from the crew, and at least one of the boys promptly inhales it and then vomits it immediately because
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
too rich, whatever it was. So Warner gets down their names. He says, "That's one of them. Just write down all your names, so I have your names correctly and spelled correctly." So one of them does that. He radios Tonga and says, "Okay, so I've got a story for you here. I need you to contact the St. Andrew's School and check these names because I found these folks and tell me what's going on." There's like a 20-minute delay while they try to get someone on the radio from the school, and then the radio operator comes back and is now crying because they realize that these six boys that were long since lost have been found alive. So they some period of time later, because they are 100 miles away. I'm not sure how long it would take to sail that distance. So, but in in fairly short order, the boys get back to Tonga, and there are crowds gathered at the dock to greet them, and families are embrace them. Their mothers are crying, and it's like, oh my God, we buried you, right? You've
Hmm.
come back from the dead, and everyone's very excited. This has happened. There's one small hurdle. The guy whose boat was stolen is pissed off, and he wants them punished.
Well,
So he's going to be a Karen right in the middle of all this, and they tell their story. They were, I think, all six of them were were jailed very briefly, but then released. And then Warner finally intervenes and tells the boat owner, "I'll pay you for the damn boat, okay? Will that make you go away?" And the guy goes, "Okay, that's fine." So Warner pays him off, and it's sort of very far from the Lord of the Flies story
hmm.
that you may have expected. Years later, Warner had a new boat called the Atta, commissioned a few years later. All six of the boys worked for him in various capacities over the years on his various crews. In 1974, Warner rescued a Welsh ship captain and his crew who were shipwrecked. But that is a
And then
story.
immediately drop them off on another island because they were well. No, oh, go ahead. Sorry, we were saying
But that's a story for another day. And that's the story of the Tongan Castaways.
that is very cool. Um, I guess the only bad thing is that Stephen went on to form the first HOA because of all of his work on the island. Um, are they all still around? I mean, they're probably in their what, 70s now?
There,
I'm guessing
I
or
believe
so.
two of them. I believe two of them are still alive. There is one. There actually is film footage. So Warner actually somehow got the rights to. He wanted to tell his story, but I can't quite tell from the footage that I watched. He may have actually had a film camera on his boat when they came aboard, because there actually is film footage of the six of them swimming to him. I couldn't quite tell. Is this a reenactment of it? Because I
Hmm.
knew he wanted to tell a documentary later
Yeah.
on. But there's the film footage on the boat of them coming on board, and these six boys are naked. So for a
Hmm.
reenactment, would you have done that? Probably not. So it feels like that's actual footage. But then they show footage of pulling back into the city, and the crying parents, and everyone's just like, oh my God, because he had a film camera for that as well, apparently. So there are two or three different documentaries about it, and there is I couldn't quite find it. There was a documentary released 6 or 8 years ago where at least one of the six went back to the island with some other. I think Aussie celebrity went back with him to kind of tell the story, and they walked the island again. So very cool. But so if you Google Tongan Castaways, there are remnants of this story on YouTube and in various other places.
That is crazy. And good on them for doing what they did and not losing their shit. I mean, that
Yeah,
I
at that age especially.
can you attribute that to, do you think, to the way they were raised? I mean, that was pretty disciplined response, really, for a bunch of teenage boys. That's pretty
Yeah,
incredible.
I don't know. I don't know. Some of that island culture that kind of has an interesting Hawaiian or Jamaican, or it kind of has a Zen inner. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, pluck 14-year-old white children from Texas or Colorado, and they'd be fried. They'd be done.
Yeah, it'd
I,
be like
I
that. It'd
think.
be like that documentary I did early in the
Yeah.
podcast series where it just goes to hell after one day.
Right. Or the house on fire, and like people injured in no time. But I don't know.
That's a fantastic story, Brian, and it is also a lead into, once again, the synchronicity you and I have, because today's curse word of the week is actually from that part of the world. It's from New
Uh,
Zealand.
oh, nice. Okay.
Shall we jump into the curse word of the week?
Absolutely.
Brian, do you know what a bushman's friend is? A bushman's friend.
A Bushman. I'm afraid to ask. A Bushman's friend. No, I don't.
It's also known as Brachyglatus rapanda or Orangiora. It's a shrub.
Okay.
It grows from 16 to 23 feet high. which to me says tree, but it is I think classified as a shrub. The large leaves have a soft furry underside, and those leaves are pretty big. They're about the size of like maybe an average person's hand,
Okay.
from what I can tell on pictures. And they've been referred to as Bushman's toilet paper.
Oh,
Now, the plant is toxic if eaten, and that's before it's been used as toilet paper. It's toxic if you just pluck it right off the plant. And the honey produced when it's pollinating is poisonous. So the Maori who started using it first, they never collect honey when particular plant is in flower because they know the honey's going to kill you. The leaves could be used for wounds and sores to wrap them in, and you can
mm.
make a gum from the plant that can be used to treat halitosis. But you don't swallow that gum. You chew on it for a while and then
Spit it
spit
out.
that sucker out. Now the thing is that from what I can tell, the slang has been passed on to refer to any potted plant that you can pee in. Like if you're at a party and you need to pee, as a Bushman's friend in the corner, and I suspect that it made its way across to Australia to be used as well.
Hmm.
So if you know you really got to be careful with what plants you use to wipe yourself with when you're out in the forests, because
Yeah.
you could pick something pretty nasty that's going to get even worse once it's been used down there. But if you're down in New Zealand, look it up, see what it looks like. It is the Bushman's friend. It seems to be called Rangiora more than anything else.
Okay.
But that's our curse word of the week. And I learned about this curse word of the week because a regular like myself at my local record store brought in a book of, I couldn't see the title, but apparently it was like naughty language stuff that would fit in perfectly with this podcast. And it actually had a picture of Bushman's friend. He just randomly opened it, and that's what
Mm.
I saw. And I was like, I got to look this up because I think I've got a curse word of the week.
Nice.
So if you're out and about hiking and need to drop a hot deuce, look for the Bushman's friend.
There you have it.
All right.
Little gems we're planning all over the world for you.
We're planning something.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
Great story on the Tongan Castaways, Bryan, and that is another episode of. Well, this is a happier ending than most episodes
Yeah,
we do. I think.
needed
Yeah,
something a little more
yeah,
in 2026 needed something a tiny bit more uplifting or something.
that's great.
Yeah.
We will be back next time for another news story. So thanks for checking us out as always, Bryan. Any parting thoughts or
Yep,
farting
just
thoughts?
parting thoughts. Thanks for everything. We appreciate you tagging along. And again, if you're out there listening to us on Spotify, especially, give us a review, shoot us 5 stars. That'd be hugely appreciated. Check out dreamidiots.com where all of our stuff is, and we're on Facebook and Instagram and all that as well. And always love story ideas. So send us some
Yep.
submissions. That'd be great.
Yeah, I've gotten a couple here over the last few weeks from people, which is kind of nice. So uh, get that going because I don't know if you noticed this, Bryan, but I tend to go kind of culty.
Hmm.
So yeah. Anyway, all right. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. Take care of each other. Be good to each other, and hang in there.
Bye.